A beloved black-owned cafe, the heart of its diverse neighborhood, became the target of a racist cop. Not in a single dramatic raid, but through a relentless campaign of harassment, bogus citations, and intimidation, he sought to drive them out of business. He underestimated their resilience and the fierce loyalty of their patrons. When his abuse became unbearable, the community didn't just complain, they organized. A massive citywide boycott of businesses that supported or tolerated the cop's behavior effectively shut him down, proving that people power united against hate can be the most potent force of all. Welcome, friends, to a story where the warmth of community clashes with the cold chill of prejudice, and where the power of collective action turns the tables on an abuser. It's about a cherished local business fighting for its survival against a cop's targeted harassment. If stories of grassroots movements, economic empowerment, and communities rising up to defend their own inspire you, please subscribe and join our conversation. Your support helps us champion these vital narratives of resilience and justice. Thank you for being here. The Daily Grind, a sun-drenched cafe nestled on a bustling corner in the racially diverse, rapidly gentrifying neighborhood of Oakhaven Hills, was more than just a coffee shop. It was a sanctuary, a meeting place, a vibrant cultural hub meticulously curated by its owners, Marcus and Lena Washington. In their late 30s, the Washingtons had poured their life savings and boundless passion into creating a space that reflected their love for great coffee, delicious home-baked goods, local art, and, most importantly, genuine community. The aroma of freshly roasted beans mingled with the scent of Lena's famous sweet potato scones. Local artists' work adorned the exposed brick walls. Bookshelves overflowed with donated paperbacks. On any given morning, the Daily Grind was a lively mosaic of Oakhaven Hills. Students hunched over laptops, young mothers sharing stories over lattes, elderly gentlemen debating politics over chess, construction workers grabbing a quick, fortifying brew. It was a place where everyone felt welcome, a testament to Marcus and Lena's warm, inclusive spirit. Marcus, a former architect who'd traded blueprints for brew methods, was the calm, steady hand behind the counter, his barista skills legendary. Lena, a culinary artist with a smile that could melt glaciers, was the heart of the kitchen and the cafe's effervescent hostess. They were a black couple who had taken a significant risk opening a business in a neighborhood that, while diverse, still bore the subtle scars of historical redlining and was now grappling with the complex pressures of gentrification. The Daily Grind was their dream, a successful black-owned enterprise that was rapidly becoming the anchor of their community. Their hidden power was not in vast wealth or political clout, but in the deep, authentic goodwill they had cultivated. It was in the loyalty of their diverse customer base, the strength of their neighborhood relationships, and the quiet dignity with which they conducted their business and their lives. It was the power of community itself, a force often underestimated, but one that, when mobilized, could move mountains, or, in this case, shut down a bully with a badge. Officer Jack Rollins was a fixture in Oakhaven Hills, but not a welcome one. A patrolman with nearly 20 years on the force, Rollins was a relic of an older, more overtly prejudiced era of policing. He was a man who wore his biases like a second skin, his interactions with the neighborhood's black and brown residents often laced with condescension, suspicion, and petty harassment. He frequented the Daily Grind, not as a paying customer, but as a self-appointed unwelcome overseer. He'd saunter in during his shift, demand free coffee, which Marcus, initially seeking to avoid trouble, would reluctantly provide, and then proceed to hold court, his voice loud, his opinions offensive, his presence casting a pall over the otherwise cheerful atmosphere. He'd make snide remarks about the element the cafe was attracting, issue veiled threats about code violations, and generally try to intimidate Marcus, Lena, and their customers of color. He seemed to particularly resent the Daily Grind's success, its popularity, its status as a thriving black-owned business in a neighborhood he still considered his beat to control. The harassment was insidious, a slow drip of poison rather than a single dramatic confrontation. Rollins would park his cruiser directly in front of the cafe for extended periods, lights sometimes flashing unnecessarily, deterring potential customers. He'd conduct random ID checks on young black men sitting on the cafe's outdoor patio. He'd issue bogus parking tickets to cars legally parked nearby, always seeming to target patrons of the Daily Grind. He'd walk through the cafe, his eyes scanning everything, making Lena feel like a criminal in her own establishment. Marcus had tried to reason with him, to be polite, to de-escalate, but Rollins was impervious to civility. He clearly enjoyed the power he wielded, the discomfort he caused. The Washingtons were reluctant to file a formal complaint, fearing retaliation. They knew how the system often protected its own, especially officers like Rollins with long tenures and connections within the department. They tried to absorb the harassment, to protect their customers, to maintain the positive, welcoming atmosphere of their cafe, despite Rollins's toxic presence. But the stress was taking its toll. Business was beginning to suffer. Regular customers, especially people of color, were starting to feel unsafe, unwelcome. The dream that was the Daily Grind was slowly, painfully being eroded by the relentless, racially motivated bullying of one police officer. Marcus and Lena knew they were approaching a breaking point. They just didn't realize that their breaking point would become the catalyst for an extraordinary community-wide act of resistance that would finally hold Officer Rollins accountable in a way they had never imagined possible. The campaign of harassment by Officer Jack Rollins against the Daily Grind escalated slowly, insidiously, like a creeping vine strangling the life out of Marcus and Lena Washington's dream. It wasn't one single explosive incident that they could easily point to, but a relentless series of petty tyrannies, microaggressions, and abuses of power that, taken together, created an atmosphere of constant anxiety and intimidation. Rollins made it a point to swing by the cafe multiple times during his shift. He'd swagger in, his hand often resting on his holstered weapon, and demand his usual, a large black coffee, always free, an unspoken tax Marcus felt compelled to pay to avoid further confrontation. While sipping his ill-gotten brew, Rollins would loudly opine on neighborhood problems, his comments invariably laced with racial undertones, often directed at the cafe's diverse clientele. "Lot of new faces in Oak Haven Hills these days," he'd say, his eyes scanning the room, making black and brown customers feel singled out and unwelcome. "Gotta keep a close watch. Can't let things get out of hand." He developed a particular fondness for inspecting the cafe's permits, which were, of course, always in perfect order and prominently displayed. He'd spend an uncomfortably long time scrutinizing the business license, the health department certificate, his expression one of profound skepticism, as if daring Marcus to have overlooked some minor detail. He'd question Lena about her food sourcing, implying her suppliers might be questionable, despite her meticulous record-keeping and commitment to local high-quality ingredients. The parking situation became a particular battleground. Rollins seemed to take a perverse pleasure in ticketing cars parked near the Daily Grind, even when they were legally parked. He'd materialize out of nowhere, ticket book in hand, slapping citations on windshields with a smug satisfaction. Customers who complained were met with his trademark sneer and a dismissive, "Rules are rules." Maybe you should park further away if you can't follow them. The unspoken message was clear. Patronize the daily grind at your own risk. He also made a habit of loitering outside the cafe, his patrol car often parked directly in front, sometimes for an hour or more, its engine idling, its mere presence a deterrent. He'd conduct random ID checks on young men of color who were simply enjoying a coffee on the patio, demanding to know what they were up to, his tone accusatory, his questions invasive. These encounters were humiliating for the individuals involved and deeply unsettling for everyone else who witnessed them. The vibrant, welcoming atmosphere of the daily grind was being systematically poisoned. Marcus and Lena tried everything they could think of to mitigate the harassment. Marcus attempted to engage Rollins in polite, reasoned conversation, hoping to find some common ground, some way to de-escalate the undeclared war. "Officer Rollins," he'd say, his voice calm and respectful. "We're just trying to run a family business here, serve our community. Is there something specific we've done to offend you? Is there anything we can do to improve our relationship?" Rollins would usually just laugh, a cold, dismissive sound. "Just doing my job, Washington, keeping an eye on things, making sure everything's orderly." His eyes would glint with a malicious amusement, clearly enjoying Marcus's discomfort. Lena, more outspoken and fiery by nature, found it increasingly difficult to hold her tongue. She had to physically restrain herself from confronting Rollins on several occasions, especially when she saw him harassing their customers. "That man is a bully, Marcus," she'd say in a furious whisper after Rollins had finally departed. "He's trying to drive us out. He hates that we're here, that we're successful, that we're black and thriving in his neighborhood." They documented every incident meticulously. Dates, times, specific actions, Rollins's exact words. They even discreetly installed a new security camera system that covered both the interior and exterior of the cafe, hoping to capture irrefutable evidence of his harassment, though they knew that official complaints against officers like Rollins often went nowhere. The fear of retaliation was very real. Rollins had friends in the department, a network of old guard officers who protected their own. A formal complaint could easily backfire, leading to even more intense scrutiny, more fabricated violations, a bureaucratic war of attrition they couldn't afford to fight. The impact on their business was undeniable. Regular customers, especially those who had been personally targeted by Rollins, began to come less frequently. Some stopped coming altogether, expressing their regret and their fear to Marcus and Lena in hushed tones. The joyful buzz that had once characterized the daily grind was being replaced by an undercurrent of anxiety. Tables that were once filled with laughter and animated conversation now often sat empty. Their revenue began to dip. The dream they had worked so hard to build was being systematically dismantled not by market forces or poor management, but by the targeted, racially motivated malice of a single police officer. The breaking point came on a busy Saturday morning. The cafe was, for a change, bustling. A local community group was hosting a small bake sale fundraiser on the patio for a youth literacy program. There was a positive, hopeful energy in the air. Then Officer Rollins arrived. He parked his cruiser directly in front of the cafe's main entrance, blocking a handicapped parking spot and a section of the sidewalk, his lights flashing unnecessarily. He swaggered onto the patio, interrupting a young black woman who was passionately explaining the literacy program to a potential donor. "All right, folks, what's all this then?" Rollins boomed, his voice full of false authority. "You got a permit for this gathering? Selling goods on a public sidewalk, that requires a permit, you know, and this is blocking public access." He conveniently ignored the fact that the bake sale was on the cafe's private patio, not the public sidewalk, and that his own illegally parked cruiser was the only thing blocking access. The young woman, a volunteer named Keisha, tried to explain. "Officer, this is a charity bake sale on the Daily Grind's patio, with their permission. We're raising money for kids' books." Rollins cut her off with a wave of his hand. "Don't care what it's for. Rules are rules." He then turned his attention to Marcus, who had come outside, his face a mask of weary frustration. "Washington, you're responsible for this. This is an unauthorized assembly, a public nuisance. I'm going to have to issue you a citation, and if these people don't disperse immediately, I'll start making arrests for failure to comply." The crowd, which included parents, children, and respected community elders, gasped at his belligerence. Lena, who had followed Marcus out, finally snapped. "A citation for a charity bake sale on our own property, Officer Rollins." Her voice trembled with suppressed fury. "A bake sale for children's literacy, while your car is illegally parked, blocking access for disabled patrons? You are beyond shameless. You are a disgrace to that badge." Rollins's face contorted with rage. He took a menacing step towards Lena. "You watch your mouth, woman, or I'll add resisting arrest and assaulting an officer to your husband's citation." That was it. Marcus, seeing the threat in Rollins's eyes, the way he was advancing on Lena, felt something snap within him. All the months of patient endurance, of trying to de-escalate, of swallowing his pride, vanished. He stepped firmly between Rollins and his wife. "You will not speak to my wife that way, officer," Marcus said, his voice dangerously quiet, his eyes blazing with a cold fire Rollins had never seen before. "And you will not threaten her. You have harassed us. You have intimidated our customers. You have abused your authority for months. Enough is enough. Issue your bogus citation, officer, and then I suggest you leave, because this time we will be filing a formal complaint, and we will not be the only ones." The air crackled with tension, Rollins momentarily taken aback by Marcus's unexpected steely defiance, and perhaps by the sight of dozens of smartphones now openly recording him from the crowd, hesitated. He knew deep down that he had pushed too far. He had wanted to break them, but instead he had ignited a fuse. He scribbled a citation with a shaking hand, thrust it at Marcus, then turned and stalked back to his cruiser, offering a final parting sneer. "You'll regret this, Washington, all of you." He gunned his engine and sped off, leaving behind a community that was no longer just anxious and fearful, but now unified in a simmering, righteous anger. The campaign of harassment had reached its zenith, and the community's response was about to begin. The blatant public nature of Officer Rollins's harassment at the charity bake sale, coupled with his direct threat to Lena Washington, became the catalyst that transformed months of simmering resentment into a powerful, organized community response. Marcus and Lena, their patience finally exhausted, their fear now eclipsed by a steely resolve, knew they could no longer fight this battle alone, nor could they rely solely on the official channels that had so often failed others. That evening they convened an emergency meeting at the Daily Grind, inviting not just their regular customers but community leaders, local activists, pastors from nearby churches, and representatives from neighborhood associations. The cafe, usually a place of cheerful chatter, was packed with somber, determined faces. Marcus and Lena recounted with painful, meticulous detail the months of escalating harassment they had endured at the hands of Officer Rollins. They presented their log of incidents, the dates, the times, the specific abuses of power. Keisha, the young volunteer from the literacy program, tearfully described Rollins's belligerent disruption of their bake sale. Other black and brown residents then began to share their own stories of being targeted by Rollins. unwarranted stops, demeaning language, baseless accusations. A pattern emerged, undeniable and deeply disturbing, of a police officer systematically abusing his authority to intimidate and control a specific segment of the community, with the Daily Grind and the Washingtons as his most visible and therefore most frequent targets. Sister Eleanor Grace, a respected elder from a nearby AME church and a veteran civil rights activist, listened intently, her expression growing sterner with each testimony. When everyone had spoken, she rose, her voice quiet but filled with an unshakable moral authority. "Brothers and sisters," she began, "what we have heard tonight is not just the story of one officer's misconduct or one family's struggle. It is a story about the abuse of power that infects our entire community. Filing another complaint that will likely be buried in bureaucracy is not enough. We must do more. We must find a way to make Officer Rollins and the department that enables him feel the consequences of their actions in a way they cannot ignore." A young community organizer named David Chen, who had been taking copious notes, then stood up. "Sister Grace is right," he said. "Officer Rollins feels untouchable because he believes there are no real repercussions for his behavior. We need to change that calculus. We need to hit them where it hurts, not with violence, but with our collective economic power and our unified civic voice." And so the idea of a targeted community boycott was born. It wasn't a boycott of the entire police department, which many felt was too broad and could harm the good officers within it. Instead, David Chen proposed a strategic, focused boycott, targeting businesses and institutions known to be either overtly supportive of Rollins and his aggressive tactics, or those who benefited from city contracts and yet remained silent in the face of such clear injustice. The primary targets would be establishments where Rollins was known to receive preferential treatment like free meals or discounts, a common if ethically dubious perk for some officers, businesses owned by his known associates or vocal supporters, and, controversially, a major chain supermarket in Oakhaven Hills that held a lucrative contract to supply the city jail and police canteens, and whose regional manager was a vocal law and order hardliner who had publicly dismissed complaints against Rollins in the past. The plan was audacious, but it resonated with the anger and frustration in the room. Committees were formed, an outreach committee to spread the word and enlist support from other neighborhoods and community groups, a media committee to craft a clear message and engage with local press who were already sniffing around the bake sale incident, a logistics committee to organize peaceful picket lines and distribute informational flyers, and a legal support committee headed by a pro bono lawyer from the community to advise on their rights and respond to any attempts at intimidation. The Oakhaven Hills Community Coalition for Justice was born that night, its first mission to bring unbearable, unrelenting pressure to bear until Officer Jack Rollins was permanently removed from their streets and meaningful reforms were implemented to prevent such abuses in the future. The hidden power of the community, its diverse voices, its organizational capacity, its shared sense of outrage, was being harnessed. They would not be silent, they would not be intimidated. They would use their collective strength to shut down the hate that Officer Rollins represented. One picket line, one canceled subscription, one redirected dollar at a time. The Daily Grind had been his target. Now Officer Rollins and his enablers were about to become theirs. The Oakhaven Hills Community Coalition for Justice, OHCCJ, launched their targeted boycott with a level of organization and passion that took the city by surprise. Within days, their message had spread far beyond the confines of Oakhaven Hills. Flyers printed in English and Spanish appeared in coffee shops, community centers, and church bulletin boards across the city, detailing Officer Rollins's pattern of harassment, against the Daily Grind and other minority residents, enlisting the specific businesses being targeted by the boycott. Social media crackled with the Boycott Rollins enablers and Stand with the Daily Grind hashtags. Local bloggers and independent journalists picked up the story, amplifying the coalition's message. The first visible impact was at Dottie's Diner, a greasy spoon on the edge of Rollins's patrol route, where he was a daily fixture, known for receiving free coffee and heavily discounted meals, often holding court with his cronies in a back booth. The OHCCJ, led by Sister Eleanor Grace and a diverse group of community members, established a peaceful but highly visible picket line outside Dottie's during peak breakfast and lunch hours. They carried signs reading, "Dottie's Diner serves hate with a side of fries," and "No community dollars for cop bullies." They didn't block entry, but their presence, their quiet dignity, and the informational leaflets they handed out to prospective patrons had an immediate effect. Regular customers seeing the picket line and learning of Dottie's tacit support for Rollins, the owner was a vocal police union booster who had dismissed complaints against Rollins as liberal whining, began to turn away. Dottie's daily revenue plummeted. The next target was Secure All Storage, a large self-storage facility owned by a known associate of Rollins, a retired officer with a similarly problematic history. The OHCCJ organized a move-out day, encouraging community members who rented units there to close their accounts and relocate their belongings. The sight of dozens of people in a coordinated effort emptying their storage units sent a clear message. Secure All's owner, initially dismissive, found his occupancy rates nosediving, but the most significant pressure point was Metro Foods, the regional supermarket chain with the lucrative city contracts. The OHCCJ focused their efforts on the Oakhaven Hills Metro Foods branch, organizing daily pickets, urging shoppers to take their business elsewhere, and launching a petition demanding that Metro Foods corporate headquarters publicly condemn Officer Rollins's actions and review its contracts with the city if no disciplinary action was taken against him. The image of elderly church members, young students, and families with children peacefully protesting outside a major supermarket, their signs highlighting the link between their grocery dollars and the city contracts that paid the salaries of officers like Rollins, was powerful and deeply uncomfortable for Metro Foods' corporate image. Sales at the Oakhaven Hills branch dropped precipitously. Customers, many of whom were loyal patrons of the Daily Grind, made a point of loudly telling store managers why they were taking their business to competing grocers. Officer Rollins, initially contemptuous of the boycott, began to feel the heat. His free coffee at Dottie's dried up as the diner's owner, panicked by the loss of business, tearfully asked him to maybe find another spot for a while. His associate at Secure All Storage stopped returning his calls. Even within the police department, he started to feel a chill. While some of his old guard buddies offered grumbling support, many other officers, seeing the intense public backlash and the negative light Rollins was casting on the entire department, began to distance themselves. His supervisors, under immense pressure from City Hall, which was now being inundated with calls from angry Metro Foods executives and other impacted businesses, put Rollins on desk duty, effectively taking him off the streets, a small but significant victory for the coalition. The Oakhaven Police Department's Internal Affairs Division, which had a long history of whitewashing complaints against officers, found itself under an unprecedented level of scrutiny. The sheer volume of documented incidents presented by the OHCCJ, combined with the video evidence from the Daily Grind security cameras and the smartphones of numerous witnesses to the bake sale incident, made it impossible to dismiss the allegations against Rollins. The mayor and the city council, facing a potential fiscal crisis if Metro Foods and other businesses began to pull out of city contracts or scale back investments, leaned heavily on the police chief to resolve the Rollins situation, and fast. The climax of the boycott movement came during a city council budget hearing. The OHCCJ, having mobilized hundreds of supporters, packed the council chambers. One by one, Marcus and Lena Washington, Keisha, the literacy volunteer, and dozens of other citizens who had been harassed by Rollins or supported the boycott, stepped up to the microphone. They didn't just demand Rollins's termination, they demanded systemic change, an end to the culture of impunity that had allowed him to terrorize their community for so long. They presented petitions with thousands of signatures. They detailed the economic impact of the boycott, not as a threat, but as evidence of the community's unified resolve. Then a representative from Metro Foods corporate headquarters, a stern-faced vice president of public affairs, took the podium. She announced that due to the ongoing and unresolved issues of public concern regarding certain members of the Oak Haven Police Department and the clear impact on our customers and our brand, Metro Foods was placing its multi-million-dollar city supply contracts under immediate and serious review, with a clear implication that cancellation was imminent if decisive action against Officer Rollins and a commitment to real police reform were not forthcoming. The council chamber erupted. The threat from Metro Foods was the financial hammer blow the city could not ignore. Officer Jack Rollins, the racist cop who thought he could harass a small black-owned cafe with impunity, had become a multi-million-dollar liability for the entire city. His campaign of petty tyranny was about to be shut down, not by a single complaint or an internal investigation, but by the overwhelming, undeniable power of a community that had finally said, enough. The boycott had worked. It had brought a bully to his knees and a city to the brink of real change. The public ultimatum delivered by the Metro Foods executive during the city council budget hearing was the tipping point. The specter of losing millions in city contracts, combined with the relentless community pressure and the irrefutable evidence of Officer Jack Rollins's misconduct, finally forced the city of Oak Haven and its police department into decisive, unequivocal action. Within 48 hours of that hearing, Police Chief Harrison, a man who had long tried to protect the old guard ways of his department, announced Officer Jack Rollins's immediate suspension without pay, pending an expedited disciplinary hearing that everyone knew was a formality for his termination. The chief, looking beleaguered and defeated, also publicly committed to a top-to-bottom review of citizen complaint procedures and use of force policies, and agreed to meet with leaders of the Oak Haven Hills Community Coalition for Justice, OHCCJ, to discuss their demands for broader systemic reforms. The OHCCJ, while celebrating Rollins's suspension as a significant victory, announced that the targeted boycotts would continue, albeit with a more focused approach, until Rollins was officially terminated and concrete steps towards systemic reform were demonstrably underway. They knew that maintaining pressure was crucial. Officer Jack Rollins's disciplinary hearing was swift. The evidence compiled by the OHCCJ, including Marcus and Lena Washington's meticulous logs, witness affidavits, security footage from the daily grind, and cell phone videos from the infamous bake sale incident, was overwhelming. Rollins, represented by a reluctant police union lawyer, offered a weak defense, attempting to portray himself as a misunderstood officer, merely trying to maintain order in a challenging neighborhood. His claims were shredded by the sheer weight of credible testimony detailing his pattern of racial bias, harassment, and abuse of authority. The verdict was a foregone conclusion: termination from the Oak Haven Police Department for conduct unbecoming an officer, abuse of power, and a consistent pattern of discriminatory harassment. Jack Rollins, the bully badge of Oakhaven Hills, was officially off the force. The news of his firing was met with jubilation in Oakhaven Hills and a profound sense of relief throughout the city. The OHCCJ organized a victory rally outside the Daily Grind, where Marcus and Lena Washington, their faces etched with emotion, thanked the community for their unwavering support. "This was never just about our cafe," Lena said, her voice thick with tears. "This was about our community, about our right to exist, to thrive, to feel safe in our own neighborhood without fear of harassment from those sworn to protect us. You all stood with us, you fought with us, and together we showed that people power, united for justice, can indeed shut down hate." The legacy of the Oakhaven Hills boycott was profound and multifaceted. Firstly, it led to the permanent removal of a problematic and abusive police officer. Secondly, it forced the Oakhaven Police Department and City Hall to implement tangible reforms, including enhanced implicit bias training, a strengthened citizen complaint process with independent oversight, though not as robust as the CCRB in other stories. It was a significant step forward for Oakhaven, and a commitment to more community-oriented policing strategies in neighborhoods like Oakhaven Hills. Thirdly, and perhaps most importantly, it empowered a community. The OHCCJ didn't disband after Rollins's firing. It evolved into a permanent watchdog organization, a vigilant civic group dedicated to monitoring police conduct, advocating for social justice, and ensuring that the hard-won lessons of the Rollins affair were not forgotten. The Daily Grind, once on the brink of closure due to Rollins's harassment, experienced a renaissance. Customers, old and new, flocked to the cafe, not just for the excellent coffee and scones, but to show their solidarity, to support a black-owned business that had become a symbol of resistance and community strength. Marcus and Lena, though forever changed by their ordeal, continued to run their cafe with the same warmth, inclusivity, and dedication that had made it a neighborhood treasure. They had faced down a bully, and with the unwavering support of their community, they had won. Their victory was a testament to the fact that even the most entrenched systems of prejudice and abuse can be challenged and overcome when ordinary people organize, strategize, and courageously wield their collective power. The aroma of coffee at the Daily Grind now mingled with the sweet scent of justice served, a daily reminder that a community united is an unstoppable force. The relentless harassment of the Daily Grind by Officer Jack Rollins is a stark depiction of how racial bias and an abuse of authority can manifest not just in explosive, isolated incidents, but in a sustained, soul-crushing campaign of intimidation designed to destroy a person's livelihood and spirit. Rollins saw Marcus and Lena Washington's success, their thriving black-owned business in a gentrifying neighborhood, not as an asset to the community, but as an affront to his prejudiced worldview and his desire for control. His actions were a perversion of his oath, using his badge not to protect and serve, but to bully and oppress. This story is a powerful testament to the incredible strength and effectiveness of community organizing and collective economic action. The Washingtons, initially feeling isolated and fearing retaliation, found their hidden power not in individual